He's Howard Eibach, a former copywriter and creative director and the author of 2 books on the creative brief.
And he's Henry Gomez, an ad agency strategist with over 27 years of experience. Together, we are the Brief Brothers. We're having an ongoing conversation, episode 101 or something like that, about creative briefs, briefing, and advertising. We're back, Henry. We keep the conversation going. Today, I'm really excited about our guest. She's coming to us all the way from Ottawa, Canada. Her name is Mara Rada, and she does something that we really haven't had a chance to talk about. Let's let her tell us. Let's join the conversation. Well, this is a delight. Mara Rada is our guest today. She is I'm not sure your title, Mara. Is it the owner, founder, creator of a company called Feral in Ottawa, Canada?
I am the founder, but I do not like to think of myself as the CEO. There is currently no CEO, but I like to present myself as the chief of strategy, because strategy is the most important part of the business we're in, at least to me. So I'm chief of strategy.
Okay. Well, Mara, welcome to the Brief Brothers. Henry and I are grateful to have you.
I'm happy to be here.
So I learned about you through LinkedIn. I don't remember exactly when we first started to connect, but you would land on a post that I would do, a comment that I would make, and you would like something, and then you'd comment on something, and then I started following you, and we just sort of connected that way. And what stood out for me, and why I was so eager to have you join Henry and me on our conversation, as I was alluding to before I hit the record button, is that we've talked with a lot of creatives, art directors and creative directors and copywriters. We've talked with strategists, we've talked with marketers, but you offer something a little bit different. You, as a strategist, help launch brands from scratch. So tell me, just share with our audience, what's the difference between someone who works with an existing brand and someone who starts a brand from scratch? What makes that? Is it more difficult? Is it more challenging? Is it 2 sides of the same coin? What is this all about, and how did you get into it?
It's more interesting in a way. You don't get to work with the same internationally renowned brands that I used to work when I was with Ogilvy, with Gray, with OMD, but you get to build them, and you can have the chance to build tomorrow's Facebook or tomorrow's Google, and that's what I want to do. The different part is that you don't work on something that already exists there, and as a marketer or as an advertising strategist, you just get to model it a little bit. You create it from scratch, so you can be the head that decides on everything, from the name, positioning, audience and targeting, who it should go after, what are the first category, what's the category of entry, where should they go. It's very exciting. It's also very challenging.
A little scary.
It's a little bit scary. You work with people who mostly have little experience in marketing, and the level of anxiety can be much higher than the one of a traditional client that has a marketing department of, I don't know, 10, 20, 50 people, and budgets in accordance. In this case, you work with people who don't know what a regular brand budget looks like, and this is in many cases it's their livelihood depending on this. And it can be also, it's not just about the people, it's also about the ideas. It can be the make or break of tomorrow's breakthrough in science. There are many scientific breakthroughs and innovations that stay in universities because the researchers are good researchers, but not good business people. So when they engage you, you have the chance to make something, or if you don't do your job right, it's both the person and the idea that you can tank. So the responsibility is enormous, and it's scary, but it's also wonderful.
I wanted to ask you real quick. So what type of clients are we talking about? You mentioned university researchers and scientific kind of breakthroughs that potentially, I imagine, have a product or some sort of intellectual property that can be sold as a brand. Is that primarily what you're working with, or are these also, you know, inventors and people that have received some degree of funding from initial funding from venture capitalists? Like, what stage are your clients generally?
So my work is divided into tiers. I work with a number of accelerators, some of them dealing with very early stage founders, idea stage founders, global accelerators like the Founder Institute, and others dealing with founders at a more advanced level. New Chip, who deals with founders from Series A to including Series C. I also worked, I've had clients, startups that had already launched an IPO. I'm a startup strategy shop, but we started as a naming agency, and we expanded around the product brand creation from naming to, okay, how do you position yourself in the market to succeed, especially considering that there's a lot of bad advice in the industry. And
No.
let's not get into that. Yes, no, there is no bad advice in the industry. So when it comes to naming, I've worked with startups like Agora, which is an IPO startup. We named one of their shows Tectonic. It's broad, just like with your traditional advertising business, where you can work with energy, cigarettes, alcohol, political parties, luxury brands, Walmart, anything and every range. Our job is not to be the expert in a vertical, in a category, in a niche. Our job is to understand what can resonate with a specific target audience and be an expert of how to market things and how to make things appealing to a target audience. I have to say, I am one of those, I don't know how many are like me, but I imagine very, very few marketers, advertisers who are against the current practices of just push your ad to everyone, just try to bore everyone into buying your product, and be persistent.
You mean the old-fashioned way?
I'm old-fashioned Ogilvy type of girl. You need to interest them. They need to love you. Don't email them ad nauseum. Do something that they see, maybe even in the real world, outside of their feeds, outside of their TV. Do something that stands out, that gets people to talk about you, and stop chasing them and start charming them. And the thing is, if you start a business with this principle at the core, I think you will have the right ingredients and a much higher chance to be able to become the apple of tomorrow than if you start your business by, okay, what's our email list? How many hundreds of people have we emailed today, and how many leads? I hate the word leads.
It seems to me that in addition to being a strategist and a marketer and an advertising professional, you've got to be a rabbi and a counselor and a teacher Because as you were intimating before, you're working with clients who are not familiar with, they're not business people necessarily. They could be, but they're not necessarily business people. They're not familiar with marketing because this is so new. So that to me sounds like it truly adds another level or another layer of challenge to what you do. How have you managed to add these new hats, wear these multiple hats, and do a good job?
Well, I work across a number of verticals. I'm also very selective with who I work with. This is not a business that I started to become rich. And like many people launching advertising agencies, smaller or bigger, I started because I love the work. And I'm trying to do good work. So I'm very selective in terms of the founders I work with. They sort of need to have an understanding that this is important before they work with me. I'm not in the business of convincing people. I'm in the business of helping people shine, of helping people get there in the wild and making the world work for them and thrive no matter what conditions are out there. Cutthroat market, recession, it doesn't matter. You have to be able to succeed, but we have to believe in the same values, because I'm not in the business of convincing people to go my way and ditch another way. That's why I'm very clear about what I do. And I always try to work with people who believe in the same ways, and the work is wonderful.
You mentioned starting out really as a naming agency or a naming shop. I haven't had much opportunity to work in that naming area, but I do have a very fond memory of the last agency I was at. We got a naming assignment. It was a pro bono client, as a school for special needs kids, and it was one of the most rewarding experiences, coming up with names, working with creatives, thinking about names, thinking about different buckets that names for this school could fall into, like either geographic and named after the founder, like the different, doing the competitive, seeing how do other people name their schools. And so I found it like really stimulating, because it isn't an area that I get to work in a lot. Maybe you could expand a little bit on kind of your philosophy about names and naming. I think to me, it used to be that pharmaceutical products had some very clever and subversive names. And I'm just thinking off the top of my head, Viagra is a product that to me connotes like Niagara Falls, which has always been like associated with like honeymoons, but in the 50s, it's and then Vitality, the V, and and Concerta, which is an ADHD drug, which is very close to concentrate, right? There's a little bit of a play. Today, the pharmaceutical products have like ridiculous names with X's and Z's and things that you don't even know how to pronounce.
Well, although Henry, I think the name Paxlovid is spot on. That's the
Name Paxlovid is interesting, and I have to say that naming conventions and naming regulations in the pharmaceutical industry is very, very different from regular corporate product, brand, event, book naming.
Of course, yeah.
There's a lot more regulations there, and usually companies can go with lists of hundreds of names, and it's a different beast. But the idea in naming, what I want to start emphasizing and then clarifying, there's a different way that you can name a product launched by a multinational corporation than it's helpful for a startup to launch. The difference consists mainly in the media budget. And a multinational corporation has the budget to support brands after launch with campaigns, with activations, with everything you can imagine. Now, startups don't have that advantage. So naming for them is a crucial element to stand out. That name can...
It's like the cornerstone.
It's a cornerstone. It can mean the VC remembers you from a set of 50 pitch decks that they saw today. The people looking for a product in a category remember you, and they look fondly to you. So it's very different. The two are very different. My philosophy in naming, and particularly in startup naming, is that names should not be functional. Functional names, especially in startup areas where there are so many fields that have a low technology barrier to entry. So you end up with gazillion companies executing on the same or similar ideas, and it's very, very crowded. Look at Web3, look at crypto. Everyone has this or that coin and crypto something. And when I teach my naming sessions, I give them examples. There are about 50 apps on any app store called Logo Maker, Logo Creator, Logo this, Logo that. And I ask them, if you have a good experience with one of these, would you remember that this one had a dash and the other one had an exclamation mark at the end? How would you be able to recommend them? Even if you go to the category from an ad, you would still see the rest of the category below and think, oh, so I have so many solutions. And you may end up paying for an ad that sends your prospective customer to someone else. This doesn't happen with positioning-based names that are looking for the emotional connection, that look to make you feel in a way, because you're buying those for more than the function. I gave the example of logo makers. Twitter, since it's very en vogue to talk about Twitter, the entire Twitter talks about Twitter, and Mastodon and Post and every other social media platform talks about Twitter. So for Twitter, there are a number of apps that make threads, and they're called Thread Maker, Thread Creator, Thread App. Everything is so similar that there is no product differentiation and no emotional engagement at the naming stage.
So what are some names that you admire? It could be from any, you know.
From the names that you know, a name I admire is Slack. Because Slack is provocative. It's fun and provocative. It talks about being a slacker, and there's that endorphin, or there are those hormones that when you realize, well, I'm a slacker, and they named it like that, this is fun, this is an approachable company, I want to be with them, not with someone that would name themselves Business Communication Solutions. So right. Slack is cute, it's provocative, it's fun, it makes me feel good, and I want to be their client. And from the names that we created in the agency, one of my I have 3 names that are my favorites so far. One of them is a company from Rhode Island. They produce a building sensor that helps easily reconvert old commercial buildings and equip them with new technology. It's a very easy to install mesh sensor, excellent costs, and it was called, when they came to me, it was called AX some numbers and something. And
really catchy.
Sorry?
Really catchy.
Yes, really catchy and memorable. It's now called Nosy, because We gave it a personality. It's not a sensor, it's a building detective. So it's curious, it's inquisitive, it looks for stuff, it looks in the dark corners to identify dark building data, and it's nosy.
How hard was the sell?
Sorry?
How hard was the sell of that name?
That was probably one of the easiest sales possible. The founder became a friend of mine. He's an amazing guy, originally British, so he has that base of British humor, dry humor. He loved it. It was probably the easiest one to sell.
So I'm going to guess that he was not an engineer.
He is on the product and engineering side.
Okay. Because I've known engineers. Engineers tend to be really literal.
Not this one.
Okay.
So it was an amazing collaboration, and we've stayed friends after that project, and he's now presenting the sensor in he's looking for funding with it, with government funding, because it can have a lot of important applications, and he presented it in a conference. He told me, but I forgot. And the name was extremely well received, and he made a note to reach back and tell me that, and we were both so happy and talked about it for about 2 hours afterwards.
Well, I think one of the tests of an idea is whether you say to yourself upon hearing it, that's so obvious. Why didn't I think of that? And I think nosy,
or I wish I had thought of that.
or I wish I had thought of that. Right. I mean, I also sometimes use the word definitive to describe something that seems perfect, and nosy for what it's designed to do seems to me as close to definitive as you could get. So that leads me to another question. You know, Henry and I love to talk about creative briefs. As a strategist, I know you're familiar with a creative brief. Is there anything different about a creative brief that you assemble for a naming project than a brief for an existing brand?
It's yes, because you don't necessarily look for the campaign, for how can it be translated and modified into a number of executions afterwards. It's just this. So, the name is the product.
It's a finite end product.
I like to argue that a creative brief really is idea first, tactic second. So this is truly an idea, provocative idea brief.
I put a lot of emphasis in how what sentiment it should create, what emotions. What is the positioning that we're looking to get, and trying to get every angle. Now, this is a brief that I built for. It started by building the brief for myself, because nobody gives you a brief. In this case, you build the brief.
Yeah.
So
you're guiding your own ideation.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and you really need to pay attention to everything that their customers may say, to everything the product is doing, what are possible existing or potential applications. And I always think about, okay, what's the personality? If this product were a human, who would they be? What would they do? How would they behave? How would they talk? And some of these are product-led, but some of these decisions are founder-led, because the founder wants their brand to have a certain personality, and that can end dictating the strategic routes. I'm sorry, English is not my first language.
Routes.
You say potato, I say potato. Let's call the whole thing.
Six of one, half a dozen of the other.
Right.
So I real quick, following on from naming, to me, it seems that and maybe it's just me as an ad guy, that the next thing would be to think about a slogan or a tagline. Is that something else that you work on? How important do you see that? Or do you think that slogans and taglines are overrated?
I don't think they're overrated. I think that they clarify and give direction. For Nosy, we went with building intelligence, which
Nice.
used the word building in its meanings of building existing
The noun and the verb.
Structures
and the verb, and it's building intelligence through discovery and curiosity. So it looking back at it, it feels like this was so simple, but it wasn't. We went through we developed for that particular client a starting list of about 300 names.
That's not surprising.
And then you start vetting them and pre-screening them for trademarking, because you want to give them something they can legally use. There's no point in giving them a name that they cannot protect, that cannot become part of their IP, so it doesn't give them any moat, or that infringes on someone else's property. So there is the process of trademark pre-screening, and we ended up with a few of them, with Canario being part of them, because the cannery and the mine association. But we decided that is as meaningful, deeply meaningful as it is, it has very sad connotations, and we did not want this to be a nostalgic brand.
Save that one for the pharmaceutical company.
Right.
Canario. I tried Canario and my life changed.
I'm curious, what if a more traditional advertising strategist, a young strategist, came to you, who's just starting out, for example? You know, Henry has mentored a number of strategists over the years, and something he loves doing. But if a young strategist came to you, what kind of advice would you give that strategist about writing briefs based on what you've learned in your branding and naming career?
Or your career overall, actually?
Well, yeah, that's good. I mean, that's a good question, but I'm wondering if there's something specific to what you do now that is enhanced or changed or clarified how you view the brief, and how you might advise someone to write a brief who isn't working in your area.
Is the strategic person working for themselves or as part of the agency? Because there is a difference.
Let's say an agency person, a young, just started out, as a first job, writing as a strategist with an ad agency.
One of the things I would guide them towards, beyond of course, be curious and read a lot of content about advertising, watch spots, see case studies of other brands, what have they done and how did they achieve what they achieved. But I would also encourage them to follow the occasional copywriter that has a social media presence, the occasional good advertising agency copywriter, which tends to be fun and plays with words and has, I like to say, the copywriter personality. I know this is a cliche, and probably it exists only in my mind, but copywriters were why I loved advertising, and I decided to stay. The way they play with words. And I think this is an essential skill, including for strategists, because they need to see what good copy is, and they need to understand that their strategy needs to be able to guide that good copy. So expose yourself to a lot of copywriting techniques, read the copy book, follow these people on social media. They are captivating, and reading what they write is sensational. Instead of necessarily diving into numbers, which is what junior strategists are usually asked to do. Be curious about the fun and the human side, because numbers stay there. You can always interpret numbers, but do it from a human perspective. Be more human. And who said that? I'm terrible at attribution. Be more human, and when in doubt, be more dog.
Oh, I don't know. So that's worth looking up, though. It was interesting. Henry and I just aired our 100th episode yesterday of the Brief Brothers, and we were doing a look back for some of our earliest episodes. And we looked back to our first episode where we asked each other, what does it mean? What does it take to be a good brief writer? And Henry said, well, you have to be a writer. You have to be a good writer. It was kind of fun to remember that this was a key element to being a good brief writer. And I was just thinking, one of the guys I love to follow on LinkedIn is George Tannenbaum.
Oh, yes.
His posts, he has a blog post every day, so he's constantly writing. He's keeping his mental machinery well-toned, but his daily posts are laugh out loud funny, and it just reflects the way he thinks about the world.
I thought about George when she was describing like following copywriters.
Yeah.
We have a couple of them I think that we both follow that have really interesting stuff. Also, we have one that we follow where it puts like clever ads from ad agencies advertising themselves, and looking at that copy is amazing.
Yeah, David Moore.
But I could certainly see where that is, very true kind of in that naming realm, right? Like the ability to play with words, to all of the different gymnastics that you can do with words and how you can shape words to get emotions out of people. It definitely has that application in the naming area. Where do you fall in, I think I know the answer to this, but the whole Byron Sharp distinctive assets, it seems to me that you're in the business of creating distinctive assets, those elementary building block distinctive assets that ideally a brand will have in perpetuity and become famous for.
I follow Byron Sharp, and many of the strategy minds, both from Australia and the UK. I was recently in a workshop with APG London with
the account planning group.
Yes, the account planning group with Paul Feldwick.
Nice. He was former guest of ours.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm honored. I have 1% of the knowledge of Paul Feldwick, and I respect him and appreciate him to pieces. So it's an honor to come to the show after such a name. The subject was fame and how to position brands and how to build brands through the fame approach. And we discussed Byron Sharp a lot, and these are the things that build a brand. So I'm very much pro building distinctive assets. And the thing is, distinctive assets are not just the name, just the slogan or the logo or a jingle. You can create an entire brand vocabulary. You can create your brand lexicon. So when people hear those words, they automatically associate them with you. And when that's happening, when you see Apple, for example, launching something and they start saying, they brought the word seamless. They surfaced it. And after they've surfaced seamless, you would see everybody else starting to say that everything they were doing was also seamless. That's when even when it's not trademarked and it's not fully associated with a brand, it's part of creating this brand lexicon and speaking in a way that's recognizable and associated with you. Mascots, vocabulary, ways to respond to news. News jacking can be associated with a certain brand, and Nike with the Colin Copernicus campaign. What was the what were the words for that?
Colin Kaepernick?
Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything.
Yeah, that's fair. You got it. You got it.
Yes. And it was so powerful, but also you'd expect Nike to go that way. It's part of their brand behavior. And
I would say maybe that it has evolved to that. I don't think they started out as associating with the bad boys and the bad girls, but they've evolved into that. I mean, the brand attached itself or associated itself clearly with the young urban athlete wannabe. So evolving into associating itself with Tiger Woods and Colin Kaepernick and the Williams
Michael
sisters,
Jordan before that.
Michael Jordan before that. That makes sense. That makes sense. So it's an evolution of the brand. What I'm finding remarkable here, Mara, is that you are speaking with such passion and such clarity that you would think you've been doing this your entire career. When did you, was there a moment when you were working for some of these other legacy agencies when you said, I need to make a change, I want to do something different? Or has this always been your mindset?
I have been doing this my entire career.
Okay. But not on your own, not on your own.
No, not on my own. So fun story, I got in advertising because I wanted a job. I had no idea what an advertising agency meant at the time.
Guilty.
I had a dog. I was in Romania. I was in my 20s, 19, 20. I don't remember exactly. I had a dog, and the dog was a champion. So I was going in these dog beauty shows, competitions. And one of my friends, I was speaking about the fact that I want a job, I want to get away from home, I want independence and so on. And this friend of a friend at the time said, well, we're hiring at our advertising agency. My question was, what's an advertising agency? Now, mind you, this was late 90s Romania. We had ditched communism for about 9 years at the time. So it wasn't a big concept. It was very early on in my country. I was a student in political sciences, and I was part of their student association, PR, something, doing, organizing the prom back home. It's organized by students. So I went, and I talked about that in the interview. They hired me. And I worked with brands like Skol and Tuborg alcohol and a TV station, big TV station.
Did you immediately start out in strategy, or was that how did
account?
Okay. And how did you transition? How was that like? How did you find strategy? Because your story parallels mine a little bit, so I'm curious, because I kind of walked into the ad agency the first day, never having contemplated. What?
They fired me.
They fired you.
They fired me after a few months when we had this discussion inside that. Why is this was a highly awarded local, but highly awarded creative boutique. So there were internal discussions about why are we not selling that good work anymore? Is it because the creative department is lacking, or is it because the client services department is not selling well? Now, as I said, I was always fascinated. The moment I stepped foot into the agency, the creative department had the top floor of, it was more like an attic, but beautiful and bohemian and music and alcohol and staying late at night. And
Mad Men.
Yeah.
Mad Men era, exactly. And I love interacting with the creatives. I thought they were fascinating, and I was fascinated with them. Especially copywriters, but art directors as well. So I was the only person in the accounting, amongst the accounts, that was mainly spending her time up with the creators, with the creatives, and was probably the only one that they tolerated around themselves, because I wasn't there to tell them what to do. I was there to admire what they were doing, and there was this slight difference.
That's the way to get to the creatives. They
And
love that.
when this question was brought into my department, I was the only one who said, well, it's us not selling well. We should do better. And I got fired the next week.
Well, of course,
then-
I'm sure that was a blessing. I'm sure that was a
Yeah.
blessing.
Then what happened?
It
now-
was, but I was shocked, and I was depressed, and I thought I'm good for nothing. And I started reading book after book after book after book. And I just fell in love with the strategy. Afterwards, I moved to Ogilvy when I worked media for a while. And I have to say, one of the reasons for which I chose media was because there were a lot of parties.
Well, the media folks here back in the old days were the ones that got all the good concert tickets. They
Yep.
got the free
Perks.
they got the free lunches and the free dinners at the fanciest restaurants.
I wanted to get into the media for these exact reasons, and I did. And after that, I transitioned in another agency towards media and online. And then in the next one, I moved back into an accounting role, but there wasn't really any strategy department. And that's when I actually started to focus on strategy. Afterwards, I went client side and did a lot of political work back home. I was the head of campaigns for the Liberal Party there, and won for them 3 major electoral campaigns: local campaigns, national elections, so municipal elections, national elections, and European Parliament. And afterwards, I decided that this is not for me, and I don't want to be here anymore, and I moved to Canada. And in Canada, I wanted to return to advertising. But by the time I finished my master's, which was the easiest way to come to Canada and remain afterwards, and got to be able to work legally, I wasn't that 20 to 30 young advertiser anymore. So it was extremely difficult to get back into the advertising space, and it didn't happen. So I said to myself, okay, if I'm not good enough to work with you and for you, let's see if I'm good enough to work against you. And that's how I launched my own shop initially. And I thought of it, what's the thing I love most about this whole thing? Words in short form. So naming was the natural selection. And from there, we went into also short form, but we went and develop back into the strategic shop. We're a small agency. I'm not claiming laurels of anything, but we're a small agency with big thinking. We know how to execute for Fortune 50, for Fortune 500. And I think of us as we're small now, but we'll grow.
So in fact, what you're saying, Mara, is that what you're doing now is what you wanted to do before, but you really weren't. So I understand what you mean when you say, I've been doing this, my entire career. But in fact, what you're saying is, I've wanted to do this. And now you are really actually doing it, but you've been studying and like preparing for this your entire career. Everything that you've done. And when you look at political strategy, what we call it here in the United States, framing, because you're framing the issues, you're framing the candidate to present him or herself as a way to solve your problems, not too unlike the way we hope a product solves the problems for a consumer. But when you're doing political strategy, it's about framing, and it's about coming up with that, a catchy phrase that's memorable that the voter will keep in mind, that distinctive brand asset when they go into the voting booth.
Where is copywriting any more important than than in the hands of a good politician who can bring those words to life? I mean, I think we've seen it in the U.S. presidents from both sides of the aisle, Reagan and Obama, right? Like what they could do with well-written words.
Right. Or George Bush and Joe Biden destroying them, but that's another story.
And others who got to be presidents a lot, being helped a lot by having a slogan that really worked and amped people around the slogan. I'm not here to name names, but there was a certain president that had a very good punchy slogan, which helped him more than anything, in my opinion. Copywriting is extremely
that and name recognition, near 100% name recognition, which even in today's landscape, like if you're thinking about potential candidates for a couple of years from now, the leading ones aside from Trump, right? Gavin Newsom, known in California, a big state, known by people who are, but most people don't know who the governor of California is. Most people don't know who the governor of Florida is. But so he did approach and come at it from like a position of, he was on everybody's TV set for like 15 years, right?
Yeah, indeed. It's just that when you do political strategy, it's not pure strategy. Part of it is strategy. Part of it is politics and management and deciding which agency to go to and selecting from, are we going with a big name who's not sure that they will be able to dedicate themselves to us? Are we going with a smaller shop launched by a former ECD who went their own way? Is this a more suitable approach for us? We went that way, and it was beneficial. And a lot of it is managing the executive board of a party, where it's not like dealing with regular clients. It's a lot of very big egos, usually middle and aged men. I was 27 at the time, 27, 28. And it was challenging to manage all of these egos, but I'm very happy that I did a pretty good job, both in selecting the agency and deciding their media strategy. They were working before with a consultant, and you have to understand that name recognition and loyalty are very important in politics. So the consultant they were working with gave them a media strategy of repeat ads in the same 2 newspapers and only 2 newspapers for the whole month when they were legally allowed to advertise. And when I saw that, I was shocked because it had an insane frequency that would have told every reader that these people are having money to waste and are on a shopping spree, but it had no reach. And the fun fact was that when I and my team created the new media strategy, and they had it quoted by both our internal team and the previously existing consultant, there was more than $1 million difference in the cost, with the consultant coming up that much higher.
I'm sure.
One thing, had it been lower, this difference, they would have preferred to continue working with that person simply because that person was perceived as there before and more trustworthy and more loyal because they were known. I was just starting with them, and I didn't have all the trust network.
You were somebody who thought she was smarter than everybody else, but you actually were. That's a great story.
Yeah, that is. I'm sure that working with all those political egos has done well by you for your working with clients today. I mean, anytime you have to work with a client who's not as well versed or comfortable or familiar with working in the marketing and advertising field, this requires a little handholding. So I'm sure that's paid off for you.
It has, because political people also, they don't know advertising. They are not at the stage of an early stage founder with no budgets, but they don't know advertising. They want things to be extra explanatory, and good luck trying to sell them a witty slogan or witty remarks, or it's so obvious, and you have to fight for every little piece of originality.
Before we started recording, I reached out to you, I guess, earlier this week, and I said if you had an announcement that you wanted to share with the world, that we would give you that opportunity. And I believe you told me that you have renamed your agency. Did I remember that correctly?
Yes.
Tell us more about that.
We started as Citronade, and it was an interesting name when we started. I underestimated how much it would be confused with lemonade, which is so known here, and Citronade being the French version of the lemonade. It didn't have memorability. It didn't have that memorability. It had recognition, but it was like, it's that girl with the lemon. And I've been thinking about renaming the shop for the better of 1.5 years past. And eventually I was able to put myself to it this holiday vacation, and renamed Citronade to Feral. It's called Feral Corporation, and it has the website thinkferal.com. And yeah, that's what we did this holiday, and we operated the name change January 1st to start the new year in a new mojo.
Well, congratulations on the new name. That's another one of those words that just, my response is, well, duh, that's perfect. A perfect name, because we know the power of that word, what that word means. It's, it's full of fertility and vitality. So I'm curious, is this something you just did on your own, or did you put this to the team?
That's something that I did on my own.
Okay. All right. How long did it take you to get there?
Well, as I said, I've been thinking about it for more of 1.5 years, occasionally here and there. But now it took me about 2 weeks all together to decide between this one and a few other options that I had. And it was the deadline, I think, that made me get onto it, because when things don't have a deadline, they just tend not to happen.
Yep. Yep.
And I put a deadline for myself. I want to change the name of the company January 1st, 2023. So I registered the new name. That's what I was doing a few hours before New Year's Eve. I was applying to Corporations Canada with the name change.
Well, I know about deadlines. As a former copywriter, we had them all the time. And I just got a deadline from my accountant for taxes for this year. So I know about deadlines. Well, Mara Rada, founder and senior chief strategist for the newly named Feral Corporation, a wonderful branding company in Ottawa, Canada. Thank you so much for joining Henry and me on the Brief Brothers.
I really enjoyed it. And again, it's this type of conversations with people who are in the industry of advertising, not, and maybe I sound like a dick here, but I think copywriters do more than content writers. I have more of an appreciation for copywriters than for content writers.
Well, I appreciate that as a former copywriter myself. I appreciate that. I know others out there who call themselves content writers, and I really don't know what they mean, but I
Another
demand. Startups don't necessarily understand copywriting, and they want someone to write their content. That's where you have the term content writer, which is more like social media post writers, blog posts, case studies, and
But
so
to me, those are all great opportunities to sharpen your copywriting, right? Like to have a good copywriter doing your social media posts, to me is, why would you want somebody just giving you something as generic as content when you could have really good copy? And
that's how I felt. I started off as a long form copywriter. I loved writing long brochure copy because I could get into telling a narrative, a story. And that evolved into direct marketing, direct response. And I've done a lot of branding work too, but give me some meat to tell a story, because that's how you sell a product. So yeah, I'm a bias that way.
I like both forms. I just think that startups want things their way. They think that it's just direct response that's helping them, and most times, if you don't have a brand that has recognition and memorability, you can do all the email campaigns in the world, and you're going to get the occasional buyer, but you're not going to have a loyal audience. You're not going to have people worshiping you and recommending you to others, or recommending you to others even when they don't work with you. And it's important. Branding work is important because it gives us a sense of reference when it comes to the products we use, and it helps us decide the ones that fit our personality. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Howard and Henry. It was a pleasure to be here with you, and I can't wait to extend the invitation back and have you on the Think Feral show that we're working on right now.
We would love to join you. That would be great. Thank you.
It would be amazing. Thank you so much.
All right. Good stuff, Henry.
Good stuff, Howard.
He's Henry Gomez.
And he's Howard Eibach. And together, we're the Brief Brothers. Till next time, bye-bye.